Hello and welcome to Growth Coaching International's Coaching in Education podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reid, and today I'm excited to record another one of our stories from the Coaches episodes, where I get to ask the questions to some of our fantastic team here at Growth Coaching International. Today, I'm genuinely thrilled to be joined by Claudia Owad, an expert in transformative power of coaching and positive psychology. Currently a director at GCI and more recently a director with the Instructional Coaching Group, Claudia brings over 25 years of experience working across education, corporate settings and not-for-profits. Her passion, helping leaders, teachers, students and parents create flourishing learning environments. Drawing on her expertise in developmental frameworks and mental toughness, Claudia combines practical strategies with an inspiring focus on strengths and growth. Whether you're an educator, a coach, or a leader, this conversation will offer valuable insights into harnessing coaching and positive psychology to create meaningful change. Claudia, it really is a pleasure to have you join me on the podcast today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Claudia, you've been with Growth Coaching International for some time now, but when we read through your bio on the GCI website, there's an extensive list of roles and achievements in the years prior to GCI. To give our listeners maybe a little bit of context, can you talk us through those earlier chapters of your career right up to the current role you have at GCI today?
Yes, thanks, Richard. My background is actually in psychology. So I started my career in that therapeutic setting. I was a drug and alcohol counsellor. I did family therapy intervention. I did relationship counselling. And then I landed in schools as a school counsellor for many years. And that's really where my passion for education developed. When I left the school setting, I went back and did my master's in coaching psychology. And I had already been really immersed in the positive psychology and I could see the synergy there. I met John Campbell through the master's degree. He was doing the same master's degree as me, although we were doing it at different times. I started to work as an independent consultant for myself. I started my own business and I worked with educators, corporate settings and in health. And I worked for the Positivity Institute, was one of the people I contracted to, which was Dr. Susie Green. It was my lecturer at university and a mentor to me, which was wonderful. And then I started doing some work with growth coaching in 2013 as an independent consultant. So I've been with the company now we're going on 11 years.
Time flies when you're having fun, Claudia, isn't that right? I think it's interesting to know that immediately you started off, your background at the very start was in counselling.
Yeah.
And at that, I suppose, gritty age where we were talking about drug and alcohol issues, and I suppose that was a great grounding for many of those skills of listening and the things that you bring to the table now as a member of the GCI team. When it comes to, I suppose, the coach training team that you're on at the moment, you've worked with numerous educators, and I know certainly in the earlier days you moved quite soon into working with educators, and quite often you're working with educators who are new to coaching. Is there one key coaching skill that you would encourage those folks to focus on most in the early stages of development? Now, I know some of the other coaches, your colleagues, have struggled with this one, trying to narrow it down to one. So I will give you that opt-out if there's more than one. But what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, there are more than one. But if I was to say the top one, I would say curiosity. I think curiosity is a really key skill as a coach. Curiosity decreases judgment. There's a famous American psychologist, educator, her name is Robin Jackson. She talks about curiosity is the antidote to judgment. So I think that's really important in your early days because we come with this expert mindset. And that curiosity actually helps us lean into asking versus telling. So that would be my top one. And the other things I would think that I would support that is, the active listening because, and listening to understand, not listening to respond, and being present, allowing for those silences, and really it promotes reflection and awareness.
It's an interesting one when you mention that phrase, curiosity decreases judgment. And when you think about, I suppose, the variety of different things that you've been doing over the years, you can see where, in many ways, curiosity has been a big strength, right from those early days. But moving into, I suppose, working with educators. And in many ways, as educators, a lot of your educators you work with, I would imagine, in most cases, would be senior leaders. And I think, and I'm going to be brave here and say, sometimes that curiosity disappears a little bit when you move into leadership. So I suppose if folks are coming along to work with yourself and other GCI coach trainers, to be able to bring back that curiosity is bound to be invaluable for those people, because quite often the focus maybe has moved into some of the other maybe management areas of the role. I know myself, thinking about my own experience over years as a principal, that management side of things sometimes tended to take over. And it's good to be, I suppose, pulled back and refocused on the leadership side of things, and in many ways that aspect of curiosity. Claudia, can you tell us a bit more about the role in many ways that positive psychology has played in your work over the years? I know when you look at the bio that you have on our website, it's clearly something that you're very, very passionate about, and you have a lot of experience in there. Give us a bit of an overview over how that's played out the past years, but also in your current work.
Yeah, I think positive psychology and coaching psychology, they are complementary, interrelated disciplines. They really fit into and off each other. They're both foundationally, they look at developing potential and human flourishing, both of them. And they're both developmental in nature. So I think there's a synergy there. And they seek to better us, as humans, as leaders, as educators. And I think the positive psychology is the why. Why do we need to look at positive psychology? Because it's grounded in theory and research as to the importance of human flourishing, and coaching is the how. How do we apply this theory? And it's through the solution-focused, goal-orientated, action-orientated conversations we have in coaching. So I think they align beautifully. I think there's a wonderful synergy between them, and they play off each other. And coaching has been referred to as an applied positive psychology.
That's an interesting one now that maybe folks maybe haven't or maybe thought about before, but the connection between positive psychology and, I suppose, the main work that we do in coaching. So the why, and in many ways the how. So that's going to be very helpful for folks who are listening, maybe joining the dots a little bit and connecting those two together, because clearly with your experience over the years, you've been able to see that maybe more easily than the rest of us. So being able to bring that in many ways into the training room is very helpful, particularly for educators. I think that's fantastic. Claudia, in our planning meeting that we had prior to this episode, you'd mentioned this term, and it intrigued me, this term ripple effect. Can you share with our listeners, what does this mean, within the context of coaching, and why is it so important?
Yeah, it is important. This was coined by Dr. Sean O'Connor and his PhD research many years ago. And Sean O'Connor is the director at for the Masters of Coaching Psychology at Sydney University. And he's written a paper with a colleague, Dr. Michael Kavanagh. And the term a coaching ripple effect, it refers to the far-reaching impact on others around those people who are being coached. So he looked at a system analysis, and he could see that there were dozens of conversations that were impacted by the person who was being coached to those around them. So if I was coaching you, what the research shows is the impact to those around you. So the research wasn't focused on the person being coached, because we know that there's an impact, because there's a huge body of evidence and research around the efficacy of coaching. But the interesting part of this research was, as a result of you being coached, you have a different mindset. You might have different conversations. You might approach things in a different way. What is the impact of those around you? And that's the coaching ripple effect. So it's quite fascinating. There is a paper by Dr. Sean O'Connor and Dr. Michael Kavanagh for those who are interested. We could make that available. And
there's also, because I noticed on our own website, there's a piece that you've put together on the ripple effect, which is terrific. And we'll put in the show notes, direct people to that so that they can see that. But that's really helpful. And I know whenever I'm listening to you, answer that question, immediately I can relate to that fact that, when I'm coaching somebody else, the impact that it has, first of all, on me, but also then that ripple effect on other people. So I think sometimes educators think about, bringing in coaching into their school or into their organization for specific people, and they maybe don't realize the ripple effect that it's going to have on in many ways everybody in the school if it's done properly, and over a period of time in a measured, sensible way. Then that ripple effect is going to have an impact on many people. And it's another case in point for investing the time and the money in developing coaching within your school. So that's something that's going to encourage, in many ways, our listeners, as one of the significant benefits of bringing coaching into their schools. Claudia, many of our listeners will be aware that during 2024, we're recording this now, it's December 2024, this past year, Growth Coaching International and the Instructional Coaching Group, which I mentioned at the very, very start, have joined forces in many ways. How would you say this has affected your role at GCI, and what are the potential benefits, do you think, for coaching in education around the globe?
Yeah, it's been a really a wonderful joining of two amazing companies and two thought leaders in the coaching and education space. I think how we've combined our suite of offerings. We have over 20 courses that we offer, consultancy and coaching, and it's instructional coaching and leadership coaching. So we're really now able to connect with and support the full gamut of educators within a system. My new role, I have kind of a dual role. I'm the director of learning and development, and that's a global role for the combined companies. And I'm also the director of consultancy and sales in North America. So my role has grown. My work hours have shifted. That's probably been the biggest shift for me. Early starts to catch the American time zone, but I'm an early riser, so I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think for me, it's helped me grow and learn about different contexts for educators, even in Western English speaking world. There are still lots of nuanced differences. So I always have the lens of a learner, even as a leader. And I think growing the work to be able to impact students is always the bottom line for both companies. And now we have such aligned vision and values, and it just means we're able to impact and reach more students and educators.
So essentially, prior to 2024, I know there had been, a certain degree of merging, between GCI and ICG, which was terrific. So it's in many ways just enhancing that, that little bit more, and opening up all of those courses and all of those opportunities now to a much broader audience. So if I'm a listener and I'm as an educator, somewhere in the States, or somewhere in Australia, or somewhere in Europe, or wherever, this as you talked about, suite of courses is now essentially available to everybody out there. We have obviously the benefit, certainly since the pandemic, of enhancing the IT side of things. So the online option is there. Obviously the time zones need to be suitable. But there's just that greater breadth of offering, for educators around the world. So it's a fantastic time. It's an exciting time for GCI and for ICG, but also for educators that are out there. And something that certainly our listeners, I'm sure they'll really welcome. Claudia, one of the most important aspects, as you know, only too well, of the work at GCI over the years has been research, right back from the inception of the company. The organisation prides itself in pioneering new ground, ensuring educators have the most up-to-date training opportunities. Now, at the time of recording this episode, as I said, we're closing out 2024 and we're looking ahead to 2025. In your opinion, with your experience, what new trends or ideas might be emerging within the world of coaching in education?
Yeah, thank you. That's really an important question. And you never quite know with trends, but there are some things that are emerging. One of them is AI or artificial intelligence and video. So that could potentially be a trend that could be impactful, specifically for instructional coaching. Another thing that seems to be emerging, particularly in the instructional coaching space as the audience matures, is personal one-on-one individual coaching. To support instructional coaches in, thinking and application and coaching cycles and consultancy work, embedding the coaching. So when people come along and do a course with us, so you're embedding that learning and applying it to their contexts, for instructional coaching, real life classroom practice, observations, and really embedding that. And from the leadership coaching perspective, or just coaching really in general, things that are emerging are more systems thinking and development, and that work around culture at a bigger systems level, transferring leadership development and aligning it to strategic planning. And another one, I think, that seems to be emerging through the professional development that I'm doing through different universities and peak bodies like EMCC and ICF is team coaching, and using coaching or a coaching approach in how you work with teams. So they say the kind of the things that I'm seeing emerging over the next few years and have emerged, have already currently are emerging. So not necessarily future, are emerging, but there could be some, watch these space moments coming up.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's an exciting time. And certainly, yes, artificial intelligence is here. It's here to stay. And I suppose the organizations out there that are stretching ahead are those that have embraced it and have decided, how can we use this to improve and enhance what we do? And I know there's a lot of development at the moment within the coaching and education world, and obviously ICG, GCI are going to be in the middle of that, trying to make sure that they have a positive impact on that. But again, when it comes to these developments, it's important to keep moving forward. And I think the educators who are listening to this particular podcast are obviously keen and enthusiastic to get to know a little bit more about coaching. But it's interesting just to broaden things out. Yes, there's the one-to-one, which folks are keen to get involved in. But you mentioned that aspect of team coaching. It's one that we've touched on already, certainly within Australia. Claudia, would I be right in saying the team coaching aspect?
Yeah, look, I think that's something that's emerging. There is research coming out about that team versus group. Is it coaching or a coaching approach? Because if you're looking at coaching, you're really looking at a goal that you're working towards. And so is it the same goal for the team? Are they different goals? Are you just using a facilitative approach with coaching to facilitate the thinking of the team? Peter Hawkins, who's done a lot of work on that, David Clutterbuck, also has done some work on that that's emerging from EMCC, the European Mentor and Coaching Council. So there is some research emerging, and there's some people playing around with that and using that in different ways. And I think as a coaching company, that's something we always want to consider, what is most effective for our clients and ultimately for students. So I think there's some really interesting things emerging there that can be applied to teams. And my colleague Christian Van Nieuwenberg would say it would be a coaching approach to working with teams, because it would be hard to do pure coaching with a team when people come with different perspectives and potentially different goals.
Yeah, I think even listening to to your answer there, Claudia, you can see immediately when I talk about the merger between ICG and GCI, the contacts and the folks that are working within these organisations are huge, and the experience that they have collectively. Would it be interesting just to list the number of books and papers and articles written just by the folks within those two organisations. So there's a real wealth of experience. But one thing, certainly in my own experience working with the organisation, there's a tremendous ability to debate and wrestle with these things, which I think is a very healthy thing. And for those individuals who are writing the books, are at the cutting edge of coaching and education, they're looking at how do we harness this and how do we use this in a positive way for ultimately, and it always comes back to improving pupil outcomes in schools. And that's one thing I think certainly is really rings true from ICG and GCI is that emphasis on this all needs to be on improving pupil outcomes, and I think that comes through, quite clearly, which encourages the folks who listen, because ultimately they're educators, and that's their main goal, is to try and improve the outcomes for the pupils and the students in their organisation. Claudia, can I say genuinely a huge thank you for joining me in this episode of Stories from the Coaches. I love the Stories from the Coaches episodes that we do. It's fantastic. It takes a little bit of insight into the individuals who work with GCI and now ICG as well. Thanks for sharing your wealth of experience and your passion for coaching and for positive psychology in education. There is genuinely so much to look forward to in the world of coaching and education. And I think podcast episodes like these certainly serve a purpose in helping to inspire educators from around the world in their attempts to develop coaching in their own contexts. For our listeners, I'm sure you found today's conversation as enlightening as I did, packed with practical takeaways and powerful ideas to empower you and your learning communities. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out the dozens of other episodes which we have in the resources section of our website at growthcoaching.com. along with a vast array of other free resources. And I hope you will join me again on the next episode of Coaching and Education, where theory and good intentions meet reality.